The shuttle doors opened with a hiss that echoed through the docking bay. Colonel David Ross stepped out first, his boots making sharp clicks against the metal floor. Behind him came Defense Minister Patricia Wells and Dr. Henry Liu, both carrying slim data tablets. None of them looked nervous. None of them looked apologetic either. Waiting for them stood Ambassador Threll of the Antari Collective, a tall creature with 4 arms and skin that shifted between blue and purple depending on his mood. Right now it was mostly purple, which meant he was angry. Next to him were 6 armed guards from different species, all watching the humans with suspicious eyes. "You're late," Threll said, his translator device making his voice sound cold and mechanical. "Your station is large," Patricia replied simply. "We got lost twice." This was not the tone Threll expected. Accused criminals usually arrived with their heads down, voices quiet, already preparing apologies. These humans walked like they owned the place. It made his skin shift darker. The walk to the tribunal chamber took 15 minutes. They passed through corridors filled with aliens from 100 different worlds. Some stopped to stare at the humans. Others whispered to each other. A few made gestures that were probably insults in their cultures. David noticed all of it, but his face showed nothing. The tribunal chamber was enormous. The ceiling stretched up so high it disappeared into darkness. Thousands of seats formed a circle around a central platform, and most of those seats were full. Representatives from 400 species had come to watch this trial. The noise of their conversations filled the air like the buzzing of angry insects. When the humans entered, the buzzing stopped. Silence fell so quickly it felt heavy. Threll led them to a small platform in the center of the room. There were no chairs, no table, nothing but empty space surrounded by hundreds of eyes. Above them, on the highest platform, sat the 7 judges of the Galactic Council. They were the oldest and most respected leaders in known space. "Humans," the first judge spoke, her voice amplified to fill the chamber. She was a Vorthene, a species that looked like walking crystals. "You stand accused of 17 violations of the Galactic Convention on Warfare. How do you answer these charges?" David looked up at her. "We would like to hear the charges first." Threll stepped forward, his 4 arms gesturing dramatically. "Charge 1. Unauthorized orbital bombardment of military targets located within civilian population centers. Charge 2. Use of psychological warfare techniques classified as mental torture under Article 47. Charge 3. Deployment of kinetic weapons in populated zones resulting in infrastructure damage. Charge 4. Use of artificial intelligence systems in combat roles without proper oversight. Charge 5. He continued for 10 minutes. Each charge was read in detail with specific examples, dates, and casualty numbers. The gallery above murmured and gasped at the worst parts. Some species had never heard of warfare this intense. When Threll finished, he turned to the humans with what might have been a smile on his alien face. "These are crimes against civilization itself. We expect you will seek mercy from this council and pledge to follow galactic law in the future." Patricia stepped forward. "We would like to ask a question first." The first judge nodded. "Speak. Who wrote these laws?" Silence again. Threll's skin went from purple to almost black. "What kind of question is that?" "A simple one," Patricia said. Her voice was calm, but it carried through the whole chamber. "You list 17 articles we supposedly violated. You reference the Galactic Convention on Warfare. I am asking who wrote that convention. Which species drafted those laws?" Threll looked confused. "The Council did. 2,000 years ago, after the first contact wars, the founding species came together and created rules to prevent such conflicts from happening again." "And humans were part of this?" Henry asked, speaking for the first time. "No," the second judge admitted. He was a Kelrath, looking like a large turtle with 6 legs. Humans had not yet achieved space travel. "But these laws apply to all spacefaring species." David's voice cut through the room like a knife. "So you wrote rules for warfare. Rules based on your own experiences, your own cultures, your own histories. Then you expect us to follow them even though we had no voice in creating them?" "These are universal laws of civilized conduct," Threll argued, his skin now flashing between colors rapidly. "They apply to everyone." "Universal," Patricia repeated. "That is an interesting word. Tell me, Ambassador Threll, how many wars has your species fought?" Threll drew himself up proudly. "The Antari have not engaged in armed conflict for 6,000 years. We resolved our differences through diplomacy." 6,000 years of peace, Patricia nodded. Impressive. And the Vorthine? She looked up at the first judge. We achieved planetary unity before developing space travel, the crystal being said. We have no history of war. Patricia turned slowly, looking up at all the species around them. Let me ask this entire council something. How many of you have experienced what humans call total war? How many of you have fought conflicts where your entire species faced extinction, where every citizen, every resource, every piece of technology was mobilized just to survive? No one answered. The silence stretched on. That is what I thought, Patricia said quietly. You wrote laws for conflicts you never fought. You created rules based on wars you never experienced, and now you put us on trial for not following them. You still violated basic principles of warfare, Threll insisted, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. David looked directly at the 7 judges. We did not come here to apologize. We came here to answer your question. You asked about our war ethics. So let me ask you this. Whose laws should we follow? Yours, written by species who have forgotten what real war means, or ours, written in the blood of 5 billion dead across 100 different conflicts? The chamber erupted. Thousands of voices shouted at once, some in anger, some in shock, some in what might have been agreement. The judges called for order, but it took several minutes for the noise to die down. The first judge's crystal body glowed brighter. This tribunal stands adjourned until tomorrow. We will reconvene to hear the human defense in full. As the humans were led out, David caught sight of an old Kelrath delegate in the upper seats. The ancient being was not shouting like the others. He was just watching, his dark eyes thoughtful. Something in that look told David that at least one person in this chamber understood what they were trying to say. The real trial had just begun. Henry Liu stood in the empty tribunal chamber at dawn, or what passed for dawn on a space station. The light slowly brightened to simulate a sun that did not exist here. He was alone with his thoughts and 100 holographic projectors that he had spent 3 hours setting up. Today they would show the galaxy who humans really were. He was not sure if that was a good idea. The doors opened. David and Patricia entered, both carrying coffee in disposable cups. That had caused a small incident yesterday when some herbivore species smelled the drink and got sick. Humans kept forgetting that their food could be toxic to others. Ready? Patricia asked. Henry nodded. The files are loaded. All 2,000 years of human warfare, condensed into 90 minutes. Are we sure about this? Too late for doubts, David said, but his voice was kind. They wanted to know about human war ethics. They are going to learn exactly where those ethics came from. By mid-morning, the chamber was full again. If anything, more species had come today. Word had spread that the humans were not behaving like normal defendants. That made this trial entertainment now, not just justice. Threll looked less confident today. His skin kept shifting between colors like he could not decide what mood to show. The 7 judges took their places above, their faces unreadable. The first judge spoke. Humans, you may present your defense. Henry stepped forward. Around him, the holographic projectors came alive. The chamber disappeared, replaced by images of ancient Earth. 5,000 years ago, Henry began. Humans lived in small groups. We fought over water, food, and land. Our weapons were rocks and sticks. The images showed early human battles. They were brutal and simple. Aliens in the gallery shifted uncomfortably, but these conflicts were small, primitive. Nothing unusual for a developing species. 1,000 years later, we invented better ways to kill each other. Bronze swords flashed in the holographic light. Armies clashed. Cities burned. The violence was getting worse, but still recognizable as normal historical warfare. We got better at it, Henry continued. His voice was flat, emotionless, like he was reading a shopping list instead of describing the death of millions. Iron weapons, steel, gunpowder. Each innovation made war more deadly. By what you call the medieval period, we had developed siege warfare that could last years. We starved entire cities until they surrendered or died. The images showed castle sieges, bodies piled up. Disease spread through crowded streets. Some aliens looked away. Then we discovered industry, Henry said, and the images changed. World War I appeared in the holographic display. Trenches, machine guns, poison gas, men drowning in mud while artillery shells tore the ground apart. The casualty numbers appeared, 16 million dead. The chamber was completely silent now. 20 years later, we did it again. This time we were more efficient. World War II exploded around them. Tanks rolled across Europe. Aircraft bombed cities into rubble. And then at the end, 2 bright flashes over Japan. The mushroom clouds rose into the sky while Henry spoke quietly. Nuclear weapons. We invented them. We used them. And for a moment we thought we might destroy ourselves completely. 200,000 people died in those 2 explosions. We realized we had created something that could end all human life. Patricia stood up then, walking through the holographic battlefield like a ghost. This is what Ambassador Threll does not understand. Human rules of war did not come from philosophy or religion or noble ideas. They came from this. She gestured at the destruction around her. We wrote laws because we had to. Because we saw what happened when we did not have rules. New images appeared. Documents this time, not battles. The Geneva Conventions. The Hague Regulations. Treaties and agreements signed by nations who had just finished killing each other. After World War II, humans created the most comprehensive laws of warfare in our history, Patricia explained. We defined war crimes. We protected prisoners. We banned certain weapons. We established rules for treatment of civilians. And we did all of this without anyone forcing us to do it. Because you feared yourselves, Threll said, his voice carrying across the chamber. Yes, Patricia agreed simply. We feared ourselves. We knew what we were capable of. So we built systems to prevent it from happening again. Henry brought up new images, modern human conflicts, peacekeeping missions, humanitarian interventions, military trials where human soldiers were punished for breaking the rules their own species had created. We enforce these laws strictly, Henry said. In the last 50 years, over 2,000 human soldiers have been imprisoned for war crimes. Some were executed. We do not tolerate violations of our own ethical codes. The third judge leaned forward. She was a felon, covered in soft fur that changed color with her emotions. Right now it was gray, the color of confusion. But the charges against you involve breaking rules. How can you claim to value laws when you violated the Galactic Conventions? David stood. That is exactly our point. We have our own laws, laws that evolved through trial and error, laws written in blood. Why should we abandon rules that work to follow rules written by species who never faced what we faced? More images appeared. Human military academies. Young soldiers learning not just how to fight but when to fight and what lines must never be crossed. Classes on ethics that lasted longer than weapons training. Every human who serves in the military spends hundreds of hours studying war ethics, David explained. They learn history. They learn consequences. They learn the difference between necessary force and excessive violence. Your council species developed rules in peace. We developed rules in the middle of the fire. The holographic display shifted one final time. It showed split images. On one side, Earth with its constant conflicts and hard-learned lessons. On the other side, peaceful alien worlds where war was ancient history or had never happened at all. We are not saying our way is better, Patricia said carefully. We are saying it is different. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every day. We competed with predators who saw us as food. We fought diseases that killed millions. We survived ice ages and droughts and disasters that would have ended other species. War was not a game for us. It was not even a choice sometimes. It was survival. Henry pulled up comparative data. Numbers scrolled past showing conflict rates across different species. The council species averaged one major war every 3,000 years. Humans had fought 47 major wars in the last century alone. You cannot compare our ethics to yours, Henry said bluntly. You are herbivores who achieved peace before space travel. You are hive minds that never developed individual conflict. You are aquatic species from calm oceans who never knew competition. Your rules make sense for you, but they do not make sense for us. Threll's skin was now solid black. So you claim the right to ignore civilized conduct because you come from a violent world? No, David said firmly. We claim the right to follow ethical codes that were designed for the kind of warfare we actually fight. Codes that have been tested in real battles, not theoretical discussions. Patricia walked back to the center of the platform. The holograms faded away, leaving just the 3 humans standing in the light. Tomorrow we will show you proof, she said to the 7 judges. We will demonstrate that human methods, as harsh as they seem to you, actually save more lives than your approved tactics. We will show you that ethics without understanding is just dogma, and we will prove that sometimes the most civilized thing you can do is admit that different species need different rules. The first judge's crystal body pulsed with light. We will hear your evidence tomorrow. But understand this, humans, the burden of proof is on you. If you cannot demonstrate that your methods serve justice, this council will have no choice but to find you guilty. We understand, David said, and we accept that burden. As they left the chamber, Henry glanced back at the empty space where the holograms had been. The galaxy had just seen the worst of humanity's history. Tomorrow they would have to show the best. He hoped it would be enough. Overnight, someone had tried to poison the human delegation. David found the contaminated water bottles outside their quarters. The toxin was crude, probably meant to make them sick rather than kill them, but it showed how some council members felt about this trial. He poured the water down a disposal chute and said nothing to the others. They had bigger problems to focus on. Today would be the hardest part. Today they had to explain Earth. The tribunal chamber felt different on the third day. The entertainment value had worn off. Now the aliens in the gallery looked serious, even worried. The 7 judges sat rigid in their seats. Everyone sensed that something important was coming. David walked to the center platform alone. Patricia and Henry stayed back, letting him take this part. He had been a soldier his whole life. He knew what it meant to come from Earth. No one else could tell this story the way he could. I need to talk about my planet, David said simply, because you cannot understand human warfare without understanding where we come from. He activated a new hologram. Earth appeared above them, blue and white and beautiful. Aliens who had never seen it before made appreciative sounds. It looked peaceful from space. This is Earth, David continued. We call it home. You classify it as a Class 12 Deathworld, which is the highest danger rating in your system. Do you know what that means? The 4th judge spoke. He was a prelin, a floating gas-based life form contained in a transparent sphere. It means the planet is extraordinarily hostile to life. High gravity, dangerous weather patterns, aggressive predator species, and frequent natural disasters. Correct, David nodded. Now let me show you what that actually means for the species that evolved there. The hologram zoomed down to Earth's surface. A lion chased down prey on an African plain. The kill was swift and brutal. In the ocean, a great white shark tore into a seal. In the jungle, a snake struck at a monkey. In the Arctic, a polar bear hunted across the ice. Earth has millions of predator species, David explained. Humans are not the strongest. We are not the fastest. We are not the most poisonous or the most armored. But we survived because we were smart and adaptable, and we never stopped trying. New images appeared. Ancient humans running from saber-toothed tigers, hiding in caves from massive bears, fighting wolves for scraps of food. Every day was survival. Every night was dangerous. While your species evolved in peace, David said, looking up at the gallery, we evolved in constant danger. The Antari come from a world with no large predators. The Vorthene are silicon-based life forms from a tectonically stable planet. The Felon evolved in forests where food was abundant and threats were rare. But humans, we had to fight for everything. The hologram showed Earth's disasters, earthquakes that swallowed cities, volcanoes that blocked out the sun, tsunamis that erased coastlines, hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, droughts. The planet itself seemed to be trying to kill anything living on it. We did not just fight other species, David said quietly. We fought the planet. We fought disease, plagues that killed half our population, viruses that jumped from animals to humans because we lived so close to predators. We survived conditions that would exterminate most council races in a single generation. Patricia stepped forward then. This matters because it shaped how we think about conflict. When you grow up on a peaceful world, war is a choice. It is something that happens because of politics or resources or pride. You can choose diplomacy instead. You can choose peace. But on Earth, conflict was built into existence itself. We did not choose to fight saber-toothed tigers. We did not choose to face the plague. We fought or we died. The hologram shifted again, showing human tribes warring with each other, not because they were evil, but because resources were limited, because territory meant survival, because when food was scarce, you either took it from someone else or your children starved. Our warfare evolved from necessity, Henry added, speaking up from his position. We developed tribal conflict because tribes competed for limited resources. We developed nation-states that went to war because populations grew too large for the available land. Every step of human conflict has roots in survival pressure. David pulled up new data. Comparison charts filled the air around them. The average council species experiences 0.5 major conflicts per millennium, he read. That means one serious war every 2,000 years. Humans fought 47 major wars in the last century alone. 47 in 100 years. The numbers hung in the air like an accusation. Do you think we wanted that? David's voice rose for the first time. Do you think we enjoyed killing each other? We are the same species. When humans fight humans, we are killing our own brothers, our own children. Every war is a civil war for us. And we still could not stop because the pressures that created conflict did not go away, just because we wished them to. Threll stood up in his section, his forearms waving. You are making excuses for violence. You are claiming that because your world was harsh, you have the right to be harsh yourselves. No, Patricia said firmly. We are explaining context. You cannot judge our ethics without understanding the environment that created them. A herbivore species that never knew hunger cannot understand why humans developed rules about starvation sieges. A hive mind that thinks collectively cannot understand why we created laws about individual surrender. You are judging us by your standards when your standards do not apply to our reality. David brought up another image, human children in schools learning history, learning about the world wars and the nuclear bombs and all the terrible mistakes humanity had made, learning so they would not repeat them. We teach our children about violence, he said, not to glorify it but to remember it. Every human child learns what happens when war ethics fail. They learn about concentration camps and genocide and atomic weapons. They learn the cost of forgetting our own rules. Do your children learn about the cost of warfare? Silence. Several judges looked uncomfortable. The Antari have not fought a war in 6,000 years, David continued. That is admirable, truly. But it also means 6,000 years of forgetting what war actually is. Your soldiers train with simulations. Your generals study theoretical tactics. Your politicians write rules for conflicts they have never experienced. And then you expect us, who fight for survival regularly, to follow those rules. The fifth judge finally spoke. She was a thorax, a massive creature like a living mountain. Her voice was deep and slow. Are you saying that species from peaceful worlds cannot understand warfare ethics? I am saying, David replied carefully, that species from peaceful worlds understand a different kind of warfare than we do. Your wars are political. Ours are existential. Your conflicts end with negotiations. Ours end with survival or extinction. Your rules make sense for your kind of warfare, but they do not make sense for ours. Patricia walked through the holographic earth, her hand passing through continents and oceans. We are not asking you to approve of everything humans do. We are asking you to understand that different evolutionary pressures create different moral frameworks. A fish cannot judge a bird for flying. A plant cannot judge a predator for hunting. And a species from a peaceful world cannot judge a deathworld species for developing survival-based ethics. Henry brought up one final image. It was a human military cemetery. Thousands of white stones marking graves of soldiers who died in wars throughout history. We remember our dead, he said softly. Every one of them. We built monuments to peace, not to victory. We honor those who died, but we do not celebrate that they had to die. That is the difference between us and you. You write rules to prevent war because you fear it as an abstract concept. We write rules to limit war because we know it as a lived reality. David looked up at the 7 judges. Tomorrow we will show you practical proof. We will demonstrate that human methods work better in actual combat situations. But today we needed you to understand this. We are not criminals ignoring civilized law. We are survivors following hard-learned rules. There is a difference. The first judge's crystal body pulsed slowly. We will consider what you have said. But the burden remains on you to prove that your methods serve justice, not just survival. Survival is justice, David said quietly. When you come from a world that tries to kill you every day, keeping people alive is the highest moral achievement. Tomorrow we will show you how human ethics do exactly that. As they left, Patricia noticed several elder species in the gallery watching them with new expressions. Not agreement exactly, but understanding. Recognition, maybe even respect. It was a start. Patricia did not sleep well. She kept thinking about the footage they would show today. Real battles. Real deaths. Real choices made by real soldiers in impossible situations. The council wanted proof that human methods worked. They were about to get more proof than they could handle. When she arrived at the tribunal chamber, technicians were already setting up the presentation systems. Henry was checking data files while David spoke quietly with a young lieutenant who had just arrived from Earth. The lieutenant carried encrypted files containing classified military footage. Today would reveal secrets that human governments had kept hidden for decades. The chamber filled quickly. Word had spread that today's session would include actual combat footage. Some species sent military observers, others sent their ethicists and philosophers. Everyone wanted to see if humans could justify their methods with evidence instead of arguments. Threll arrived last, his skin a confident bright blue. He clearly believed humans could not prove their case with facts. Theory was one thing. Reality would be another. The first judge called the session to order. Humans, you have claimed that your methods, while appearing brutal, actually reduce casualties. Present your evidence, Henry stepped forward. We will show you 6 scenarios. 3 using council-approved warfare tactics, 3 using human military doctrine. All 6 are real events from the border conflicts with the Karathi Empire. The results speak for themselves. The first hologram appeared, a planet called Settler's Hope, a small colony world caught between Council and Karathi forces. Council peacekeepers had arrived first, following proper galactic protocol. Council approach to siege warfare. Henry narrated as the images played. Step 1. Establish orbital blockade to prevent reinforcement. Step 2. Broadcast surrender demands every 12 hours. Step 3. Minimal bombardment of military targets only. Step 4. Wait for garrison to surrender or until humanitarian concerns force intervention. The footage showed months passing. The Council fleet maintained its blockade perfectly. They followed every rule. They protected civilian infrastructure. They never exceeded authorized force levels. Everything was done by the book. Duration of siege 8 months, Henry said flatly. Military casualties 400. Civilian casualties 140,000. Cause of civilian deaths: starvation, disease, infrastructure failure, and medical supply shortages. The Council forces maintained ethical blockade procedures throughout. They broke no rules. The chamber was quiet. 140,000 dead civilians was not a small number. Now compare, Henry said, and a second hologram appeared. Another colony world, similar situation. But this time human forces responded to the crisis. The footage showed something very different. Human warships did not establish a patient blockade. They struck hard and fast. Precision weapons took out the garrison's command center in the first hour. Communication systems went offline. Power generation was destroyed. Within 24 hours, the defending forces had lost all coordination and most of their heavy weapons. But the humans did not stop there. Psychological warfare began immediately. Broadcasts in the Karathi language explaining exactly what would happen next. Demonstrations of human weapon capabilities. Promises of fair treatment for those who surrendered. Threats of escalation for those who did not. On day 3, the garrison commander tried to rally his forces. Human artillery made the garrison headquarters disappear in a fireball visible from orbit. The replacement commander surrendered 6 hours later. Duration of conflict 3 weeks, Henry stated. Military casualties 800. Civilian casualties 2,400, mostly from collateral damage during infrastructure strikes. Human medical teams deployed immediately after surrender to treat wounded and restore basic services. Colony returned to full function within 2 months. Patricia watched the judges carefully. They were doing the math. 140,000 versus 2,400. 8 months versus 3 weeks. The numbers were brutal but clear. You simply terrified them into giving up, Threll protested. That is psychological torture. Yes, David agreed. We made them afraid. We made surrender more attractive than fighting, and we saved 137,600 lives by doing it. Which is more ethical, Ambassador? Following rules while civilians starve, or breaking rules to end the conflict before humanitarian disaster develops? Henry pulled up the second comparison. 2 more planets, 2 more sieges. The results were similar. Council forces followed protocol and watched civilians die slowly. Human forces broke rules and ended conflicts quickly. The third comparison involved urban warfare. A Karathi occupation force had taken control of a city with 2 million residents. Council forces prepared for a careful, building-by-building liberation that would minimize damage to infrastructure and reduce civilian casualties through slow, methodical clearing operations. Projected timeline 14 months, Henry said. Projected civilian casualties 80,000, mostly from crossfire and supply disruptions. Then the human approach. Strike teams inserted at night, simultaneous attacks on every major Karathi position. Overwhelming force applied for 72 hours straight. Then suddenly, humanitarian aid flooding in before the dust settled. Human engineers restoring water and power. Human medics treating everyone, even enemy wounded. Actual timeline, 9 days. Actual civilian casualties, 11,000. Yes, the initial assault was violent. Yes, buildings were damaged. Yes, it looked brutal. But the war ended before famine and disease could develop. The occupation ended before the psychological trauma of living under enemy control could permanently damage the population. The fourth judge's sphere glowed brighter. But the destruction, the terror, the lives taken. War takes lives, Patricia said bluntly. That is what war does. The question is not whether people die. The question is how many people die and how long they suffer before the dying stops. Human methods end wars quickly. Quick wars kill fewer people. It is mathematics, not philosophy. Henry showed more examples. A hostage situation where council negotiators followed protocol for 6 weeks. While hostages died one by one, human special forces violated diplomatic procedure and extracted the hostages in one violent night. A border dispute where council observers documented violations for months while villages burned. Human peacekeepers enforced a ceasefire within days using overwhelming presence and willingness to shoot first. Every comparison showed the same pattern. Council methods were cleaner, more civilized, more rule-following. They were also slower, less effective, and resulted in more total casualties. Your methods look better, David said. They feel more ethical because you avoid the hard choices. You wait for enemies to see reason. You negotiate. You try every peaceful option. And while you do all that, people die. Not from your weapons, so your conscience is clear. But they still die. Threll's skin cycled through several colors rapidly. You are twisting the data. You are choosing examples that support your argument. Then choose your own examples, Patricia challenged. Pick any conflict from the border wars. Any battle where both council and human forces were involved. Look at the casualty rates. Look at the duration. Look at the outcomes. The pattern holds every single time. Henry pulled up a massive data wall. Hundreds of conflicts, thousands of engagements, all documented and analyzed. The statistics were undeniable. Human forces ended conflicts faster with lower total casualties, even when their methods seemed more violent in the moment. The sixth judge leaned forward. She was a Welix, a species known for their logical thinking. Explain something to me. If your methods are more efficient, why do they appear more brutal? Why do they generate so much criticism? David smiled grimly. Because we front-load the violence. Council methods spread death out over months, hidden in statistics about malnutrition and disease. Our methods concentrate death into hours or days, visible and shocking. We would rather have 3 days of horror that everyone remembers than 8 months of slow suffering that everyone ignores. Patricia added, and we take responsibility. When human weapons kill civilians, we count them. We investigate. We prosecute soldiers who exceed authorization. When civilians die during a council blockade from starvation, who is responsible? The blockade commander who followed orders? The politicians who wrote the rules? The ethics committee that approved the strategy? Everyone can claim clean hands. We get our hands dirty, David said simply. We make the hard choices. We live with the nightmares. But the people we save get to live. That is the trade we make. Henry showed one final piece of footage. A human soldier, young woman barely 20 years old, sitting in front of a military tribunal. She had exceeded her rules of engagement during a raid, killed 3 Karathi soldiers who were trying to surrender. She was crying as the verdict was read. Guilty of war crimes, sentenced to 15 years in prison. This is what human ethics looks like in practice, Henry said. We fight hard. We fight dirty when we must, but we also punish ourselves when we go too far. We enforce our own rules strictly because we know what happens when we do not. Can any council species say the same? The chamber was silent for a long time. The judges conferred quietly among themselves. The gallery watched and waited. Finally, the F. General Rothak of the Karathi Empire limped into the tribunal chamber like he owned it. The Karathi were a warrior species, tall and covered in dense scales that could stop small arms fire. Rothak was missing his left arm from the shoulder down. A human weapon had taken it during the 3rd Battle of Frontier Station. He had requested no prosthetic. He wanted everyone to see what humans had done to him. David watched the general carefully. This could go very badly. The Karathi had lost the border conflicts decisively. Their military had been shattered. Their expansion halted. If Rothak came here seeking revenge through testimony, the human case would collapse. Threll practically glowed with anticipation. He had requested this witness personally. The victim speaks, his posture said. Let us hear what human mercy really looks like. The first judge addressed Rothak formally. General, you commanded Karathi forces during the border conflicts. You faced human military forces in direct combat. This council asks you to testify about human warfare methods and treatment of defeated enemies. Rothak looked up at the 7 judges, then around at the gallery, then finally at the 3 humans standing in the center platform. His face was unreadable. Karathi expressions did not translate well to other species. I will tell you about humans, Rothak said, his voice deep and rough. But I will tell you the truth. Not what you want to hear. Threll's skin flickered. That was not the opening he expected. The third battle of Frontier Station, Rothak began. My fleet outnumbered the human defense force 3-1. We had superior ships, superior weapons, superior position. I was confident. I had studied human tactics. I believed I understood how they fought. He paused, his remaining hand clenching into a fist. I understood nothing. The battle lasted 4 hours. In the first hour, humans destroyed my flagship, killed my command staff, and crippled my communications. In the second hour, they eliminated my heavy cruisers using weapons I did not know they possessed. By the third hour, my fleet was scattered and burning. In the fourth hour, I gave the order to surrender because the alternative was watching my soldiers die for nothing. The chamber was completely silent. Human weapons took my arm, Rothak continued, touching the empty space where his shoulder ended. A projectile weapon, primitive by galactic standards but effective. I was unconscious when my pod was recovered. I expected to wake up in a prison cell, possibly in an interrogation room, definitely in pain. He stopped, and something that might have been a smile crossed his alien face. I woke up in a hospital bed. A human doctor was treating my wounds. She spoke Karathi badly, but she spoke it. She told me the arm could not be saved, apologized for the loss, and asked if I had pain. When I said yes, she gave me medication immediately. No questions. No demands. Just treatment. Threll stood up. General, please focus on their warfare methods, not their medical care. Rothak turned to look at Threll, and his eyes were cold. Their medical care is part of their warfare method. That is what you do not understand. He turned back to the judges. For 3 months I was a prisoner of war. Humans held me and 4,000 of my soldiers in a detention facility on Outpost Meridian. We expected torture. We expected forced labor. We expected to be used as hostages or leverage. That is what warriors do with captured enemies. Patricia felt her heart beating faster. This was the moment. Everything depended on what Rothak said next. Instead, humans followed their own laws of war. We received medical treatment equal to what their soldiers received. We were given food that met Karathi nutritional requirements. Even though it must have been expensive to import, we were allowed to communicate with our families once per week. We were permitted to practice our religion and maintain our military structure among ourselves. When 3 prisoners became seriously ill, humans flew in specialists from Earth to treat them. Rothak's voice grew stronger. One day, a young human guard struck a Karathi prisoner who had insulted him. Within hours, that guard was arrested. He was court-martialed by his own commanders and sentenced to disciplinary action. The prisoner received an official apology from the camp commander. They punished their own soldier for one moment of anger against an enemy who had killed his friends weeks earlier. The general walked closer to where the humans stood. Do you know what that taught me? It taught me that human rules are not just words. They enforce them, even when it costs them. Even when no one would blame them for looking the other way. The second judge spoke. General Rothak, we appreciate this testimony, but the question remains. Did their warfare methods cause unnecessary suffering? Define unnecessary, Rothak replied sharply. They destroyed my fleet in 4 hours. Yes, it was violent. Yes, it was terrifying. Yes, I watched good soldiers die quickly. But consider the alternative. If humans had fought the way you suggest, following your council rules, the battle would have lasted weeks. Maybe months. Thousands more would have died on both sides. The suffering would have been prolonged. Which is more merciful? Quick death or slow one? He turned to face the gallery. I am a warrior. I have fought 17 campaigns across my career. I have faced enemies who tortured prisoners, who executed wounded soldiers who showed no mercy to the defeated. Humans are the most terrifying enemy I have ever faced in battle, but they are also the most honorable in victory. Thrall tried again. They use psychological warfare. They deliberately terrify their opponents. Yes, Rothak agreed. They broadcast messages telling us exactly what would happen if we did not surrender. They showed us images of their weapons. They made it clear that resistance was futile, and because they did that, many of my soldiers chose to surrender instead of fighting to the death. They lived because humans gave them the option to be afraid. Is that not mercy? A new witness was called. Administrator Vel of the Kirathi Colonial Office. She had overseen a city under human occupation for 6 months. Thrall clearly hoped she would describe oppression and abuse. Instead, Vel testified about something completely different. Humans occupied our city after the 4th offensive, she said. Her voice was tired. I expected the worst. Occupation is always terrible. The occupiers take what they want, abuse the population, and pretend they are bringing civilization. She looked at David. Human soldiers had strict orders. No looting. No unauthorized entry into private homes. No harassment of civilians. Any soldier who broke these rules faced immediate punishment. 3 human soldiers violated the rules during the occupation. All 3 were arrested, tried, and imprisoned. Their own commanders prosecuted them. Vel pulled up documentation. Humans brought engineers to restore our infrastructure. They brought doctors to treat our wounded, even though those wounded included soldiers who had fought against them days earlier. They established supply lines to prevent food shortages. They hired local workers and paid them fairly. After 6 months, when Kirathi civilian government was restored, the city was in better condition than before the war started. The 5th judge looked skeptical. This sounds like you are praising your occupiers. I am telling the truth, Vel said firmly. I did not want humans in my city. I resented their presence. I hated that we lost the war, but I cannot deny what I witnessed. Their occupation was firm but fair. They had overwhelming force and could have done anything they wanted. Instead, they followed their own rules strictly and left as soon as possible. She paused, then added, compare this to the Kirathi occupation of human colony worlds. We took resources. We impressed civilians into labor. We suppressed local culture. We stayed as long as we could extract value. Humans occupied our territory, rebuilt what they had destroyed, and handed control back to us in less than a year. Which species behaved more ethically? Thrall was now cycling through colors so rapidly he looked like a malfunctioning display screen. This was not going according to his plan at all. More Kirathi witnesses came forward. A pilot who had been shot down and rescued by human forces. A civilian doctor who worked alongside human medics. A politician who negotiated the peace treaty. Every one of them told similar stories. Humans were brutal in combat but honorable in victory. They followed their own rules even when it cost them efficiency or advantage. The final witness was not Kirathi. It was a felon observer who had documented the war from neutral territory. She provided recordings, detailed reports, comprehensive analysis of human military behavior. Her conclusion was clear. Humans violated council conventions regularly, but they adhered to their own ethical codes strictly. More importantly, their methods resulted in shorter conflicts with lower total casualties. When the testimony ended, General Rothak stood one more time. This council asks if humans are ethical. I cannot answer that. Ethics are complicated, but I can tell you this. I have fought beside and against many species. Humans are the only enemy who made me afraid to fight them, but unafraid to surrender to them. They are the only occupier who left my people better than they found them. They are the only victors who treated defeated enemies with genuine respect. He looked directly at the 7 judges. Your rules are beautiful in theory. Human rules are practical in reality. I know which I prefer. I know which saved more of my soldiers' lives. And if I had to fight another war tomorrow, I would pray to face enemies who followed human ethics rather than yours. As Rothak limped out of the chamber, David felt something he had not expected. Relief. Not because the testimony helped their case, though it did, but because Rothak confirmed what David had always believed, that human soldiers could be both warriors and honorable, that they could fight hard and still show mercy, that the rules written in blood actually meant something. The trial was almost over. Tomorrow would bring the verdict. Tonight, David would sleep better than he had in weeks. The verdict chamber looked different from the main tribunal hall. Smaller, quieter, with only the 7 judges and the 3 humans present. No gallery, no observers, no witnesses. Just the people who had to make the decision and the people who would live with it. David had been in situations like this before, waiting for commanders to decide if his actions in combat were justified or criminal, waiting to learn if he would receive a medal or a prison sentence. The waiting was always the worst part. Not knowing was harder than knowing bad news. The first judge's crystal body pulsed with steady light. Humans, this council has reviewed all evidence, heard all testimony, and debated extensively. We are ready to render judgment. Patricia held her breath. Henry's hands were completely still. David stood straight, his face calm, but his heart was pounding. The charges brought by Ambassador Threll are dismissed. The relief was immediate, but David did not let it show. There was more coming. Judges never stopped at the simple verdict. The first judge continued. However, this dismissal comes with significant context that must be stated clearly. This council finds that human military forces did indeed violate 17 articles of the Galactic Convention on Warfare. The evidence of these violations is conclusive and undeniable. Patricia's relief turned to confusion. Dismissed but guilty? How did that work? Nevertheless, the second judge took over, his turtle-like face thoughtful. We also find that the Galactic Convention was written without input from or consideration of species from Class 12 Deathworlds. The convention assumes certain baseline conditions that do not exist in human evolutionary history or current military reality. To hold humans to standards developed without their participation or relevant experience would be unjust. The third judge, the felon with color-changing fur that now showed deep blue contemplation, leaned forward. More significantly, we find that human military forces maintain and enforce their own ethical codes with rigor equal to or exceeding council standards. While these codes differ from galactic conventions, they demonstrate clear moral reasoning, consistent application, and genuine commitment to limiting unnecessary suffering. The fourth judge's sphere glowed bright. The testimony from Karathi witnesses proves that human ethics are not merely theoretical. They are practiced even when inconvenient, even when costly, even when no outside observer would know if they were violated. This suggests genuine moral integrity rather than performative compliance. David felt something strange. They were being praised and criticized at the same time. Judges were admitting humans were right while also acknowledging they had broken rules. It was the most alien thing he had experienced in this entire trial. The fifth judge, the massive Tarax, spoke in her slow, deep voice. This council must also acknowledge uncomfortable truths about our own conventions. Evidence presented by humans demonstrates that strict adherence to council warfare protocols can result in higher casualties and prolonged suffering. This is unacceptable. Rules designed to reduce harm that actually increase harm are not ethical, regardless of how civilized they appear. Threll, who stood to the side as prosecutor, looked like he wanted to disappear. His skin had gone completely gray, the Antari color of shame. The sixth judge, the logical Wellix, stated facts with precision. Statistical analysis confirms human military methods end conflicts significantly faster, with measurably lower total casualties than council-approved tactics. In 16 comparable scenarios, human approaches average 73% fewer civilian deaths and 82% shorter conflict duration. These numbers cannot be ignored. The seventh judge, who had remained silent throughout the entire trial, finally spoke. She was an ancient being, a Krell whose species had been spacefaring for 10,000 years. Her voice was soft but carried absolute authority. I am old enough to remember the first contact wars. I was young then, but I remember the fear, the uncertainty, the terrible choices made in ignorance. The Galactic Convention was written by survivors of those wars, species who desperately wanted to ensure such horrors never happened again. We wrote beautiful rules based on beautiful ideals. And for 2,000 years those rules have served us well because we have fought beautiful wars, theoretical conflicts, political disputes, border disagreements, nothing that truly tested our ethics. She looked directly at the humans. And then we met you. Species from a world that does not allow beautiful wars, species who learned ethics through horror rather than philosophy, species who wrote their rules in blood while ours were written in ink. You terrify us because you remind us that the universe is not as safe as we pretended, that our rules work only because we have been fortunate enough to never truly need them. The old Krell stood, something witnesses said she rarely did anymore. Humans ask whose laws they should follow. The answer is their own, not because they are superior, but because they are appropriate to the reality humans face. Different species need different ethical frameworks. This is not moral relativism. It is recognition that ethics must be practical or they are merely decoration. The first judge took control again. Therefore, this council issues the following ruling. Human military forces are not required to follow the Galactic Convention on Warfare. Instead, humans will maintain their own codes of military ethics and enforce them according to their own standards. However, humans will provide educational resources to council species about human military ethics, doctrine, and decision-making processes. Patricia could not stay quiet. You want us to teach you? Yes, the third judge said simply. We want to learn from you, not because we wish to fight as you fight, but because we recognize that our ethics have been untested. We need to understand how to make hard choices, how to balance ideals with reality, how to maintain moral integrity under true pressure. Humans have experience we lack, the first judge continued. Furthermore, this council establishes the Combined Military Ethics Committee, co-chaired by human representatives and elder species who remember the First Contact Wars. This committee will review and potentially revise the Galactic Convention to address shortcomings revealed during this trial. David found his voice. You are admitting your rules need changing. We are admitting our rules are insufficient for the galaxy as it actually exists, the second judge corrected. This is not weakness. It is wisdom. The ability to recognize error and correct it is the foundation of all ethics. The seventh judge spoke again. Humans asked whose laws they should follow. But now I ask humans a question. When council species face extinction-level conflicts, which rules will you want them to follow? Beautiful theoretical guidelines that result in disaster? Or practical ethical frameworks that actually save lives? David understood what she was really asking. She wanted to know if humans would help protect the galaxy using human methods, if they would share the hard-learned lessons, if they would take responsibility for teaching others what Earth had taught them. We will help, David said quietly. We will teach what we know. We will share our experience. But understand this, human ethics are not easy. They require making choices that haunt you. They require accepting that sometimes the most moral action is one that feels terrible. They require living with consequences instead of hiding behind rules. We understand, the first judge said, and we accept that burden. This tribunal is concluded. Humans are free to leave or to remain and begin the education process immediately. Patricia looked at David and Henry. They had come here expecting to be judged. Instead, they were being asked to be teachers. It felt wrong somehow, but also right. We will stay, Patricia decided. If the galaxy wants to learn about human ethics, we should start immediately. The universe will not wait for us to be ready. As they left the verdict chamber and returned to the main hall, David noticed something had changed. The aliens who had watched with hostility now watched with curiosity. The military observers who had taken notes looked eager rather than dismissive. Even Threll approached them, his skin now showing blue respect rather than purple anger. I did not understand, Threll said simply. I thought ethics were universal constants. I did not realize they could be conditional on environment and experience. I am sorry for accusing you of crimes when you were simply following different but valid moral frameworks. Within a week, human military instructors arrived at council academies across the galaxy. They brought weapons, yes, but more importantly, they brought case studies, ethical dilemmas, scenarios with no good answers. They taught young council officers not just how humans fought, but why humans fought that way. They taught the cost of war, the weight of command decisions, and the responsibility that came with power. Some students were horrified. Some were fascinated. Some simply realized that their beautiful theories would crumble the first time they faced real battle. And that realization, David thought, was the most important lesson of all. Henry stood in a lecture hall on the council's primary military academy station, looking out at 200 alien students from 50 different species. They watched him with a mix of fear and interest. Human war ethics, Henry began, start with one simple principle. Take responsibility for your choices. Do not hide behind rules. Do not blame circumstances. Do not claim you were just following orders. Every action you take, every weapon you fire, every decision you make is yours to own. The nightmares are yours. The guilt is yours. The consequences are yours. But so is the knowledge that you did what you believed was right, even when right was hard. A young Antari student raised one of her 4 hands. How do you live with that? How do you carry that weight? Henry smiled sadly. You do not carry it alone. You carry it with everyone else who made the same hard choices. You honor those who died by remembering why they died. You prevent future wars by teaching what you learned. And you never ever pretend that war is anything other than organized horror that sometimes becomes necessary. The classroom was silent. Then slowly students began taking notes, not just recording information, but engaging with ideas that challenged everything they thought they knew about ethics and warfare. Patricia watched from the doorway and thought about how strange life was. They had come here as defendants. They were leaving as teachers. The galaxy had questioned humanity's ethics, and humans had replied not just with words but with evidence, with testimony, with the hard truth earned through centuries of mistakes. Whose laws should humans follow? Their own. Because those laws were written by people who understood that ethics without reality are just pretty stories. And the universe needed more than stories. It needed species willing to make hard choices and live with them. The trial was over. The real work was just beginning.